Hi, Wendy. How you doing this evening?
Hi, Jesse. Oh, it's so great to be with you today and to share some more stories about leadership, especially in these trying times.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity to talk with a colleague of mine, Angela Bick. She is the assistant superintendent to the Newburyport Public Schools about negotiation. You can imagine her job as assistant superintendent is pretty stressful as it is, and then you throw in a pandemic and it gets even more complicated. But before we get there, want to share a little bit more about what she does. She's been in the learning community for more than 30 years, and as assistant superintendent, she wears a ton of different hats.
So I oversee curriculum, instruction, and assessment for pre-K through 12. Um, I am the director of our English language learner program. I oversee our homeschool learners. I am the liaison for our homeless families and our foster families. Um, and I oversee supervision and evaluation for our school district.
Wow. So, as you can tell, she is a busy woman supporting the Newburyport Public Schools.
Yes, and Jesse, how would you say, or did she talk a little bit about how COVID has affected her work?
Yeah, the biggest takeaways that I heard her say over and over again is just how unpredictable her work is and how the variables keep changing. In her leadership role, she has to not only work with a bunch of different stakeholders to put the plans together to figure out how does everyone return to school in a safe way, at the same time reassuring them, but then everything keeps changing on a day-to-day basis. And in the end, she said that because the problem solving was so complex and novel, it was kind of exciting, but now people are exhausted and this fatigue has just set in. But she still needs to play that leadership role to help that positive momentum move forward, and it's not easy.
As a leader in my position, part of my job is to keep everyone excited and to reassure them that it's all going to be okay. And so I think that's been the greatest challenge is the other leaders and as our educators are getting more and more tired and fearful, and fear breeds negativity. You've got to combat that all the time. How do we help keep people positive? How do we reassure them that we indeed do have the tools and the expertise to get through this? um, at the same time validating that the whole situation is unpredictable and uncertain.
To sum it up, Wendy, not easy. It's not easy what she needs to do.
And would you say that she commented on what's been particularly hard during this time?
What I took away from our conversation was just what was so challenging was managing complex negotiations with all the different stakeholders that she needs to deal with. Regardless of a pandemic, as assistant superintendent, she's interfacing with the state and Department of Public Health and Department of Education and parents and the Teachers Association and the school board. But then you throw in a pandemic and things get way more complicated. She said that safety, as identifying safety as priority number one, has really been sort of a guiding light, if you will, to help stay focused when it can be so uncertain and so unpredictable. And but yet the stakeholders that she deals with, their opinions are changing too, from the leaders of the facilities to the teachers, even to the parents of how they want their kids to return to school in the safest way possible.
So some want their children in full time, some don't want their children in at all, some would like to have a hybrid model which eases the children into schools. We are also negotiating with our school board board or our school committee, because our school committee has many of their constituents coming to them and voicing their opinions about what they think should be happening, and they are trying to be advocates for those people, and so we are negotiating with them about the different perspectives that they're representing. We're negotiating with our teachers all the time because our teachers are afraid. They're afraid to come back, and they feel all of a sudden like they're frontline workers, and that wasn't anything that they signed up for when they became an educator. And so being able to negotiate the conditions of their of the environment that they're going to be working in and the ways that we're going to protect them has been huge.
Yeah, it's really challenging. It's hard to find a different word, Wendy.
And did she talk a little bit about the challenges online in particular?
The biggest thing that she said was just around having clear and consistent communication when you're on Zoom or other online platforms is just so important, because you don't have that benefit of being in person when something can be so complex and so sensitive, like negotiating how to come back to school safely. And here's her story on that.
Well, I think you try to be as transparent as you can be in your communications. Uh, you over communicate. I found that to be so necessary. When I think that I have communicated something fully, I need to communicate it 3, 4, 5 more times, because people hear things when they're ready to hear it. And so I think it's really important that as a leader, you are active listening all the time, and that you really use your skills to hear what is also not being said out loud. What are the concerns between the lines, so that you can get to the root of what's on people's minds and then be able to address that.
I think, whether there's a pandemic or no pandemic, her thoughts around communication are just so um, relatable to any other sort of complex negotiations or complex points of being a leader in an organization. Clear and consistent communication is just super important.
I really also liked what she said about you can't over communicate. And I think that's key here is you've got to communicate as often as you possibly can. And I think I also heard her say that you need to be consistent with the messaging. So those are other two great tips I think she's given us.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we talked a little bit more about what's going on right now with those negotiations in returning to school. And just to sort of tee up this story, she and her team formed an inclusive advisory committee of about 60 different people with a variety of different skill sets to help them figure out how do we develop these different plans that are required by the state to tackle September and what education looks like for the rest of 2020. So they worked for a number of different months. The next step was submitted to the school committee, and they had a few weeks leading up to when the teachers were returning and the students were returning. So it was just kind of like an anxious, urgent time. And unfortunately, the school committee did not vote on their plan.
So, as you can imagine, people were very discouraged. This had been months of work and research to get to the place where we felt we had a solid plan. So many people were involved and so much had been considered. And, in one evening, a short meeting, it got taken apart, and people were sent back to the drawing board. So that was hard. It was difficult. Um, and in that, it all of the negotiations that we had done with our teachers association came apart, because it was a huge violation of trust. They trusted us as administrators that we would move forward with the plan that they had agreed to. And when we had, our oversight board not agree to that, and to change, not only not agree to it, but to change the plan rather than saying, take the plan back and figure out a way to do this different. It was just a huge violation in trust. And so we ended up in further negotiations, and now negotiations that were not as congenial as they had been before. I think everybody's fear rose to the surface. We had many teachers making a decision to take a leave of absence and not come back to school as a result of it, or take a temporary leave, which the state has allowed teachers to do for the first 12 weeks of school if childcare is a challenge. There were just all of the things that we were trying to avoid happening out of fear happened.
Not an easy time for Angela, to say the least. She told me at the end that they're working on a new plan. They're working with all the right stakeholders to figure out how to return to school. We still have a few days left before that happens for their school district. But they're starting with just like an amplified level of anxiety on top of the anxiety everyone was already experiencing because of the pandemic. So it's just created a lot more work for her and her team.
And do we know how the negotiations are going so far? Has she shared that with you?
I don't have the most recent updates, but it does, and I do know that the students are returning by the end of September. So, Wendy, maybe we can do a negotiation part 2 with Angela to figure out, this is just a learning opportunity for everyone, where we take something as negotiation and then throw it into this complex, ambiguous environment of a pandemic. So I like your idea. Let's continue this in a
Good
part
idea.
2. But she does have some learnings. She take a look back and what they could have done differently. And her thoughts are that her and her team could have started the process earlier. They were waiting from the state to come out with these different guidances, and the guidances were late or they were changing. But in the end, if she felt like they could have started, they could have been in a place to start earlier.
We had to incorporate the guidance, but we ended up doing that anyway because the guidance came so slow that you had to start planning. You had to start your process without it and then go back to incorporating it. So, that would be a lesson learned. I think if I ever had to face a pandemic or something of this magnitude again, I would remind myself that we do know what to do. We don't have to wait for someone to give us guidance about how to move forward in the place that we're comfortable leading.
Well, I hope that Angela never has to deal with a pandemic again. But I mean, it's like an incredible. I think it's pretty beautiful the way that she has gleaned this learning opportunity from that experience.
And just think about what she said is you can never start planning early enough. And also, you heard a little bit about, because she's gone through this, I think their team sounds like now they have the confidence to move the negotiations forward, even when there's still some holes in exactly what we're supposed to do. I so value the really the learning from that, and the courage that she's really sharing with us about how they're just plowing forward. So that's awesome.
Wendy, it reminds me a little bit. You are a project management professional, and in that vocabulary of project management, progressive elaboration. You're just you figure it out as you go, and that's exactly right in what you're saying and what Angela said too.
I love, one of my friends early on said to me, Wendy, there's 2 words that really make a difference. It's called press on. So
Yeah,
you just have to press on.
exactly. Press on. You know, and I asked Angela, why does she do the work that she does, right? I mean, as I mentioned before, even without a pandemic, being a assistant superintendent is a challenging role. And for her, she said it's really just about the kids.
I think the thing that has always excited me about education is that I truly do believe that children are our future. And if we can have a positive impact on how they grow and learn through the work that we do, I don't think there's any greater job that one could get up and go to every morning.
Yeah, so I just want to say thanks to Angela, for taking the time to talk with me and share this story. Thank you, Wendy, for watching these videos with me and dissecting what we can learn on how to better negotiate as leaders and then, put within this context of trying times. I think it's just a great learning opportunity for all of us.
Oh, that's so good. And I think the thing that she talks about there, right, is her mission and what drives her. And
Mhm.
when she wakes up in the morning, I think she's thinking about those kids. And I think for all of us trying to get through trying times, you really want to have that mission in your mind. Maybe even have a 3x5 card next to your computer when you're dealing with something challenging to remind yourself, hey, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I might be getting frustrated and experiencing a little pain, but I'll get through it and I'll press on if I really remind myself what it's really all about.
Wendy, I love that idea. I think I'll do that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for taking this
Okay.
time. And Leadership Lessons Live will continue to explore different concepts of leadership. If anyone watching this video has comments for us, please leave a comment. And looking forward to doing more great work with you, Wendy.
All right. Subscribe to our channel.
Oh, yes,
Bye.
subscribe, please. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.